Thanks, Dambani, and thank you so much to everyone for joining the webinar, and full marks Dambani for using the word enlighten as part of your presentation or my introduction, since that's the name of our institution. At the University of Glasgow, we find we tend not refer to it as an institutional repository. We don't find that's a very useful word, so we tend to as enlighten. So as Thimbani said, yes, I'm going to talk a little bit about EPrints software itself, about the University of Glasgow's experience. We now have a number of EPrints repositories up and running. A little bit of EPrint services, who I've been fortunate to work closely with over the years. Look ahead at some of the features and the development. Much thanks to academic lead from the University of Southampton. Of slides which I've taken from Les's both in Helsinki and earlier this year. So in terms of this repository, I think the really important word here is a set of services offered to a member of institutions. So the University of Glasgow, it's very much by our intention to make as much of our research outputs and our content as openly accessible as possible, but EPrints can be used, as we increasingly see, in a whole variety of different ways. It could be used for preservation. There's plugins for that, for scholarly collections. People have used it for e-publishing, for data sharing, for research management, and that's one of the things that it's kind of moved a bit more into, for marketing, but also as well for research assessment. So the University of Glasgow, Enlighten was used as the vehicle which we used for a national assessment exercise called the Research Excellence Framework. All of the selections which are studied for their best 4 publications were recorded in Enlighten, the institutional repository. So this next slide, it's always good to have cake in a presentation. So this slide is from Les, and really it sort of demonstrates how mature I think the EPrints software and the repository and the service is. The software is now about 15 years old. I'm fortunate that I think probably back in 2001 we started playing with EPrints version 1 here at the University of Glasgow, and we're now up to version 3. But equally as well as a service, EPrint Services is it's a service provided by the University of Southampton team. It's possible to host repositories. It's possible for them to actually do some technical and development work, and we have certainly over the years we've contracted with them. We host our repository locally at Glasgow, but we have a contract with EPrint Services, and they support technical development and other pieces of work which with the repository. So as I say, EPrints came out of the School of Electronics and Computing Software at the University of Southampton in the UK. It is open source, so it's freely available. So say we have a paid contract for EPrint Services. Is only a recent development over the last years because of particular things that we wanted to develop and within the software. The software itself is freely available. It can be downloaded by anyone. It can be installed, and one of the things I'll talk about a little bit later is it can also be extended with a range of features which are called plugins from a service which EPrints provides called the EPrints. which we like to think of as the sort of the app store of the ePrints world. It comes with a range of ways of extending how you can use an ePrints repository. So when I was going back through these slides, apparently ePrints 3 was launched back in 2007, and that was a really fantastic step up for ePrints. That's probably the most installed version. It's certainly the one that I would recommend using. And having a look at services like Open Door, there are probably kind of 380, 400 archives. I do apologize, excuse me. Running ePrints. It has a very active user community with a wiki, with the mailing list. I do apologize. I have a little bit of a frog in my throat today. And in recent years, we also have a user group which has been held at the Open Repositories Conference, which has tended to be between North America and Europe. So this year we were in Helsinki, and it was a chance to catch up from ePrints themselves about the work that's going on, but also to have the community. It's really important, it's really great to have that ePrints community share the work which they're doing with the repository software. So, pardon me, the ePrints team in Southampton currently host about 70 repositories. They're dealing with over 100 institutions across a range of countries here. They also manage the core software and will be working with and developing ePrints 4 and continuing to do it. And why do they do it? Well, it's not for profit. It's very much driven by the open access agenda, which is very important here in the United Kingdom, and I think across the world. It's about making our research as freely available and as accessible as possible, and it's all about building up and supporting that wider repository community. I think there are elements of our repository which, again, we've learned from, we've seen in other institutions, and we've wanted to actually develop and take forward. I remember when we looked at introducing ePrints 3, ePrints 3 had a number of very, very clear goals, and I think it's been very successful. Oh, sorry, there. Being able to lower the barrier and auto-complete the data. Being able to enter once and to reuse that data. It's very important for us as well. We want to only need to give us their data once, and we reuse that in lots of different ways. And it's a very straightforward platform for people to continue to develop add-ons, which again we'll have a look at shortly. If you haven't already, it is worth having a look at the eprints.org website, and there's also a demo prints service. It's running the latest version of the software and gives you an opportunity to actually try out all the features. And again, that's all freely available to download, and there's guides to install all of that. And I was kind of smiling when I looked at that, because I wrote a piece back in 2007 about how great we actually ePrints 3 was, which I remember thinking was a significant milestone towards ideal repository software, and it's continued to evolve, and it continues to be a very, very excellent piece of software which we are continuing to develop and to use at Glasgow. So taking a step back for a moment about the University of Glasgow. So ePrints Enlighten is our institutional repository, but that is also backed up. In 2008 we released a university publications policy which made very clear that we wanted to increase the visibility of our research, and we wanted to manage the way in which we support and provide keep track of our research. And in order to do that, we have encouraged staff to deposit the material, or at the very least provide details of their publications, and they are all going into Enlighten. So Enlighten has now become the university's publications database, as well as a repository for full text content. This is what the current homepage looks like, and it is definitely in need. It's definitely in need of a makeover. It does, however, have a number of the key components. It has the search options. It has browse views. Browse views are very powerful. Within EPrints, we have a specific Glasgow author view, so all of our authors are identified by their unique local Glasgow identifier. So we can have listings and publications, which enables us to just show here are all the publications for Professor X or Professor Y. And we don't need to worry too much about having multiple John Smiths because we identify them in different ways. We also pull down and make sure that we have research funding data. That's very important in the UK now, and we continue to capture that data. This is just an example of a full text record. In a repository, you can see a wide range of the fields. We've extended these beyond the core fields which you get within EPrints, so we added things like the online ISSN field. We recognize when a paper was first published. Down at the bottom of the screen there, you can see we have funder and project information, so we tie our publications data to funders from various research councils in the UK as well as elsewhere. Excuse me. And we also provide the full text and, where available, the Creative Commons licenses. This is another slide showing the colourful donuts. Over the last year, we've done some work with the ePrint services team and with a company called altmetric.com. And Altmetric are interested in surfacing details about when publications appear on Facebook, when they're tweeted, when they appear in Google Posts, or more particularly when they also appear in news outlets. So for instance, if it's mentioned in the newspapers, if it appears in a particular journal. And it will identify these, and it will create, in this case, a multicolored almost sort of donut which reflects the various messages and elements of this. So that's been quite an interesting feature for us to add. We do, however, also track download statistics for individual records, and we also have a link both to Scopus and to Web of Science. So we import more traditional citation data. However, at the moment we currently don't surface that citation data, but there is a free API both for Scopus and for Web of Science, which enables us to import that data on a regular basis. Beyond the Enlighten service, though, we've continued to expand the number of repositories which use ePrints at the University of Glasgow. So, for instance, we now require the mandatory electronic deposit of theses. We only require one hard copy to be provided, and we have built a separate theses service. We have about 1 million downloads a year, 1 million downloads now that we just passed for Enlighten this year, but theses are even more popular, and we just passed 1.5 million downloads of our full text theses at the university, which seems to be a fairly phenomenal statistic. Students do have the opportunity to set an embargo. Theses can be embargoed for 3 years, and that embargo can be renewed. However, we find many of the students do make those theses freely available. They like to share them on Facebook and elsewhere, and we see an increasing amount of usage from the theses. Another service which we are just working on at the moment, and which is building on some work from JISC in the UK, has been to build a data repository for research data. So this will be a registry of research data. So the examples shown here, one of them is for radiometric data from Fukushima. So we have the report which is held in Enlighten, and there's a link from that report back to the range of TIFF files and data which we have for which supports that data for Fukushima. So research data has a number of additional specific fields, for instance, the geographic data about where the data was collected, how it was collected, and so on. So we have set up a wholly separate research data repository, and we're using EPrints for that. Pardon me. Beyond that, we are also exploring opportunities, for instance, to put all of our full text exam papers into a repository and our undergraduate dissertations. So as you can see, I hope that there's a variety of different applications and uses which just from one core installation of EPrints, which can be developed and then spun out for use. However, as I said earlier, one of the important things about asking our academic colleagues for adding and providing the data to the repository is we're very keen that that data is only given to us once. So what we have here, this is a screenshot of one of the staff profile pages here at the university. You can see in the grey boxes there's a number of publications listed. And these publications are pulled from Enlighten. So all of the publication data now which appears in staff profile pages is automatically populated from Enlighten, our institutional repository. In this case, the boxes are grey because one of the most asked for features, and in this case, this academic has probably a couple of hundred publications. One of the most requested features has been for staff to be able to select their top, for instance, 5 or 6 publications, to highlight those, as well as also being able to display all of their publications. So there's a feature within EPrints. It's an add-on called Shelves, and Shelves has enabled us to let the academic colleagues select particular publications which they want to highlight. And working with our web team, we're able to make these publications much more readily available. Our university web team like this approach as well, because it now means that individual staff can readily make changes to their publications. They're then reflected in the web pages, but the individual web pages themselves don't need to be edited by those staff. Beyond that use for individual staff, we also found that various research groups across the university have also started to use shelves. So again, in this example here for urban transportation, you can see books and you can see articles. These are 2 separate shelves where a group of colleagues have got together and said, okay, here are our most important or the most relevant books and articles in our field that we've authored, which we want to make available. So we've been really pleased to see how much that has taken off, and I think it also demonstrates the flexibility and the functionality of EPrints and the way in which we can use it to engage with different parts of the university. So I thought I would do a very quick walkthrough. There'll be, if you haven't already got an EPrint service or have a look at the demo prints service, I thought I would talk a little bit about the kind of managing deposits and metadata assistance features within EPrints. So demo prints is a fully functioning version 3 version of EPrints. It's hosted by EPrints. It's open to anybody to go in and to add records, to edit records, to import records. It is reset every week, so anything that you may apply to it will get wiped. But it's a really good opportunity to have a look at the browse options, the search options, and just to get an idea of that. One of the things as well, you'll see in the top left, there is login, create account, and a feature called IR Stats 2 Demo. Now, IR Stats 2, which is Institutional Repository Statistics 2, is an add-on to EPrints, which was just, I think it was formally released earlier this year, and that provides download statistics and a dashboard which gives you details of the number of hits for records. It gives you details for the downloads, and it will do, for instance, a top 10 of who are your most downloaded or most accessed authors. So EPrints is freely available for use. You can see here, here's an option for managing deposits. There's a range of import options. This option here is for BibTeX. One of the majority of the records we import into our repository at Glasgow use the digital object identifier. And again, what came out of the Open University, there's a very nice plugin which the Alan Stiles at the Open University wrote, which does duplicate checking on DOIs. So when you go to import records, it will check to see if there's a match within your existing repository for that paper, so that you don't end up duplicating records. So you can see here there's a range of options. You can see what you've got. You can go in and you can edit those. The little trash can is for deleting them or for making those outputs available. The default version of EPrints comes with a wide range of output types. So you have article, book sections, monographs, theses, patents, and so on. Again, this is highly customizable. When we first launched Enlighten at the University of Glasgow, we actually only had articles. This was a very, in fact, I think we might even have skipped over item type because we didn't have anything else that we wanted people, excuse me, anybody to actually add. But there are a number of default options here. These can then be added and extended, and a wide range of fields. You can see across the top here, type is in blue. There is a workflow. You have type. It will then ask you to upload the publication. It will give you details. If you want to apply subjects, so the Library of Congress, a sort of Library of Congress subject heading is a default subject heading, and then equally the deposit. And again, when it's deposited, certainly here at Glasgow, we have a review team. I have 4 staff who work in the University of Glasgow's Enlighten team. They review the content. They will assist our staff with any issues with copyright, with full text, and so on. And they'll provide assistance and support for the deposit. Here's an example of the details screen. It's also showing here the title. If a title has already been entered, pardon me, it will automatically flag that so that you know that that's already been created. If you're adding a creator, it's very easy to also clearly see, has this author got a number of other items already held in the repository? And as I was saying earlier, this is the most popular, certainly for us at Glasgow, which is the import items from DOI, so that we can bring that data in to the repository. Okay. And you can see if you have a successful import, you get this green bar at the top saying item successfully imported, at which point you can then edit those records, decide to push them into the main archive. At the moment they are sitting in the user work area. So an ePrint can exist in a retired space where it has been moved and isn't publicly available. It can be in the user work area. It can be in a review file, which editors can review. So we have the editors here for doing that. Or it can be in the live archive where it is publicly available. So I've talked a little bit about a couple of plugins or extra features, things like shelves, where we've used it for additional publications or selected publications. We've also talked a little bit about the IR Stats 2 plugin, and there's quite a rich collection of plugins which EPrints now offers. Some of these come from ePrint services themselves, some of these come from the community. Now, there is an existing EPrints file repository, which is, of course, itself an EPrints repository, and that includes some of the latest plugins. There are probably more add-ons here within this repository. Not everything is in the bazaar. The idea of the EPrints bazaar is that it's a sort of one-click plugin. You just install that piece of software. You don't need to be particularly techy, and you will just install it, and it then works. In many cases with EPrints files, you probably then need to do a little bit more with the actual technical side of the software. But again, this is where you can download the latest version of EPrints. You can download a range of translations. EPrints comes in a variety of different translations. So you can see here, this is now pardon me, a Russian version of the translation is available. And as the box says here, the EPrints Bazaar represents a major leap forward, and it is essentially a sort of app store for EPrints. So it has a wide variety of options. This is quite an old slide, but you can see more recent ones, which include IR stats, which include things like shelves, options like MePrints. They've originally done some work with themes. There are preservation plugins. So there's lots of exciting, and every time I look at the bazaar, I think, yes, that's another one that I would like to use. And when we were doing the work with our research data repository, all the fields for that were created and added through a plugin. So you download the bit of software, you push the button, and it then creates and adds all of the fields that we were looking for. So just a little bit again, I think, to sort of underline what is EPrints for, what can it be used for, and this is a very great, very good diagram from Professor Les Carr from Southampton, and it shows you've got research activity, research business, and research content. So at the moment we're using our different repositories very much for different bits of research content. For instance, publications, you could use it for educational resources and scientific data. Pardon me. But beyond that, for research business, there is how we can support the management of those, where we've included funder data, where we've used it for assessment exercises, and then the broader area of research activity, how we can use it to capture data analysis, how we can use it for capturing individual pieces of data. So I really like this slide from Les. This is what is EPrints for, and I think this gives a flavor of just the breadth of options and functionality and flexibility which EPrints can be turned to. It's about open access, it's about publications and research reporting, but it's also about scientific data, big data, educational resources, research management, project and funding data. It can be used for facilities information management, and it's very much for this notion of the data-driven university. If there's data there, we could put it in an EPrints repository and extend it. So the EPrints services team have been working on EPrints 4. They've already, they're not rewriting the software, but they have, looking at making it more nimble, making it much more generic, so that the additional plugins and various other things can be done. They're looking at modernizing the various elements of the user interface, so things like Bootstrap and Mustache and so on for templating, for responsive design and so on. So I've certainly seen some previews of some of the work that they've done with EPrints 4, and I'm very excited about that. We really probably won't see that until the coming year, but it's been really exciting to get a glimpse and an idea of the work and the way that's moving ahead. Looking ahead as well, with thanks to Les, certainly within the UK, we have a service called IRIS, which does institutional repository statistics and does a lot of normalization for all of our repositories. We're looking at ways in which we can route publications from and import publications into our repositories from a central point. ORCID has become a very important element as we move forward for researcher identification. Work's been ongoing to make it more straightforward to import Web of Knowledge and Scopus records. And also, there's a project we're involved with in Glasgow called End-to-End Open Access, and we're working with EPrints services and other institutions such as the University of Kent in supporting open access and looking at ways in which, what are the fields and what are the reports that we're going to need from our EPrints repositories in order to support open access and ensure that we are compliant with our funders in the UK. So this final slide is also one from Les's. It's about looking ahead at being able to handle current and emerging information agendas and mandates, how we can support current and emerging research practices, not just open access, but current research information systems, data citations, open education, science, making it a much more modern and responsive experience. And I particularly like the last one, making it as an easy upgrade path with EPrints 3 software, which is clearly what we're using at Glasgow and several other hundreds of institutions across the world. So here's a number of additional URLs and options for you to have a look at, including the demo prints, the EPrint software itself, further guidance on the wiki and so on, and my details here as well, william.nixon@glasgow.ac.uk. But I'm very happy if there's time to take any questions. But really, that was all I wanted to just give you guys an overview of EPrints itself and our work at Glasgow.